and I were waiting for her sister to arrive, and the hostess, who was probably 30 years old, just somewhere the synapse in her brain said, "Oh, Shirley MacLaine is going to Debra Winger's table." So imagine both of our surprise when she's being surprises.
At 70, Debra Winger has nothing left to lose and nothing left to hide. For decades, whispers floated through Hollywood about the co-stars she couldn't stand, the sets she stormed off, the relationships that soured faster than studio coffee. But Winger never confirmed them, until now. Sitting in a small, sunlit room far from Los Angeles, she finally names the 6 actors who left the deepest marks, some with words, others with actions. This isn't a revenge list. It's a record, a ledger of wounds and betrayals she carried quietly for years. And now, she's telling each story in her own words. In 1980, Urban Cowboy was the kind of role young actresses dreamed about. But for Winger, it became a storm she could never quite escape. John Travolta, still basking in the glow of Saturday Night Fever, walked onto set with a disarming smile and a curiosity that didn't feel entirely friendly. He opened their first conversation by asking about her religion, then her education, probing in a way that felt less like small talk and more like quiet judgment. Yet on screen, the chemistry was undeniable. Off-screen, it was chaos wrapped in charm. Their romance burned hot, but it came with sharp edges. In one pivotal love scene, Travolta was supposed to deliver a stage slap, the kind designed to look brutal but feel harmless. Instead, his hand landed hard and real, cracking one of her teeth. There was no apology, just a continuation of the scene, as if nothing had happened. A week later, he proposed. Winger refused without ceremony, walking away from a relationship that had tipped from passion into control. She never looked back. Her silence on Travolta in later years wasn't forgiveness. It was the refusal to reopen a wound she'd already sewn shut. An Officer and a Gentleman gave Winger one of her most celebrated roles and one of her most frustrating experiences. Playing opposite Richard Gere, audiences saw sparks of romance and emotional depth. Winger saw nothing. She famously described him as a brick wall, a man impossible to connect with no matter how many takes they shared. The distance wasn't mutual attraction masked as tension. It was real disconnection. Gere was polite but remote, holding himself apart in a way that made their scenes feel like choreography, not conversation. Louis Gossett Jr., their co-star, later confirmed they avoided each other whenever cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, the air grew heavier. Director Taylor Hackford and producer Don Simpson, both wielding sharp tongues and unchecked authority, fueled the alienation. At one point, Winger was told to take diuretics because her face looked puffy on film, a humiliation disguised as a note. When she halted production to protest a scene she believed misrepresented her character, she was branded difficult. Years later, Gere admitted there was tension, but offered no detail. Winger didn't need to elaborate. For her, the truth was simple. Some walls can't be climbed, no matter how much the world wants to see you try. If tension with a co-star is exhausting, tension with the men in charge can be soul-crushing. On An Officer and a Gentleman, Winger found herself not just performing, but constantly defending her dignity. Taylor Hackford, the director, had a reputation for being intense and uncompromising, traits that often turned into bulldozing over dissent. Don Simpson, the producer, was notorious for crudeness and for treating actresses as accessories to a film's marketability rather than its integrity. For Winger, the breaking point came in daily humiliations. Simpson openly commented on her appearance in front of the crew, dismissing her as not **** able enough for the lead role. He scrutinized footage after every shoot, ordering her to medicate her body to suit his aesthetic vision. Hackford, while less openly vulgar, often dismissed her creative input until, on one occasion, her refusal to shoot a scene forced him to reassess. In the end, Hackford admitted she was right about the scene's emotional logic, but acknowledgement didn't erase the label she'd been given: trouble. The two never worked with her again. For Winger, that was fine. She'd rather lose jobs than lose herself, a trade Hollywood has never forgiven her for making. By the early 1990s, Winger was cast in A League of Their Own, a period drama about women's baseball during World War II. She dove into the role with unmatched commitment, 3 months of intensive training with the Chicago Cubs, perfecting every swing, sprint, and slide. This wasn't just a part, it was a craft she intended to honor. Then came the announcement: Madonna had joined the cast. For most actors, it would have been an exciting headline. For Winger, it was a sign the film's focus was shifting. The project she'd signed on to, a historical drama with grit and authenticity, was becoming, in her words, an Elvis movie, where music and spectacle overtook truth. She didn't argue. She didn't plead with producers. She simply left. No statements of outrage, no interviews attacking Madonna. When later asked about the pop star's acting, Winger coolly replied, "Her film career speaks for itself." Gina Davis replaced her, and the film became a hit. Winger never regretted walking away. For her, the choice was simple. When the heart of a project changes, your heart has permission to change too, even if that means stepping aside. In terms of endearment, 1983, Shirley MacLaine and Debra Winger created one of cinema's most unforgettable mother-daughter duos. But off-screen, their relationship was anything but tender. From the first day, the generational divide was obvious. MacLaine, poised in elegance and old Hollywood grace, met Winger's raw, unvarnished energy with polite skepticism. The set quickly became a pressure cooker. Winger's directness clashed with MacLaine's precision. In one infamous moment, Winger barked at MacLaine to hit your mark during a take. MacLaine fired back, and Winger, in a burst of mischief or defiance, lifted her skirt and passed gas in MacLaine's direction. MacLaine recounted it in her memoir. Winger didn't deny it. They weren't enemies so much as sparring partners in a fight neither wanted to lose. When MacLaine won the Oscar for the film, she declared, "I deserve this," a statement the press loved to frame as a jab. Winger shrugged it off. Decades later, both actresses still get asked about the feud. Winger usually smiles and sidesteps, letting the legend live on. Because in Hollywood, some rivalries aren't meant to be resolved, they're meant to be remembered. By the late 1980s, Winger had weathered co-stars who were aloof, controlling, charmingly toxic, or simply impossible to read. But nothing prepared her for John Malkovich during The Sheltering Sky. To audiences, Malkovich was cerebral, magnetic, a master of the internal monologue. To Winger, he was a mannequin with perfect posture, a man she likened to a runway model, not because of beauty, but because he seemed more interested in presenting himself than inhabiting a role. In Winger's world, acting was a contact sport, not in the physical sense, but in the willingness to collide emotionally with your scene partner. She thrived on unpredictability, the rawness that comes when two performers truly see each other. But across from Malkovich, she felt unseen. Every scene felt like delivering lines into a void, the words bouncing off glass instead of skin. It wasn't personal venom. Winger didn't dislike Malkovich as a human being. She disliked the performance style, the sense that the work was for the audience's gaze rather than the truth between two characters. He moved beautifully. His face was beautiful, but I had no idea who I was talking to, she once admitted. The Sheltering Sky, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, was visually stunning, the Moroccan desert sprawling in poetic emptiness. Yet for Winger, the experience was hollow. She left the production without bitterness, only certainty. She would never work with Malkovich again. Not because of a feud, but because she knew the void between them couldn't be bridged. Some actors leave a mark because they clash with you, others because they never touch you at all. For Winger, Malkovich was the latter, a ghost of a collaboration, beautiful in form, absent in soul. Across her career, Winger was called many things: brilliant, magnetic, uncompromising. But the label that stuck like a thorn was difficult. It was whispered by casting directors, muttered by producers, printed in the gossip columns. And in Hollywood, that word is a loaded weapon, especially for women. For male actors, challenging a director is a passion. For Winger, it was insubordination. When she refused to shoot a scene that contradicted her character's truth, she wasn't praised for integrity. She was warned she might never work again. When she walked away from roles that no longer reflected the script she signed onto, she wasn't seen as principled, she was painted as unstable. Part of it was timing. The 1980s and early 1990s were an era when actresses were still expected to smile through insults, wear whatever was chosen, and adjust their bodies to suit a man's lens. Winger didn't smile on command. She didn't accept that her value was tied to being likable. She didn't flatter egos to survive. Directors like James Bridges later admitted she had been right in her creative fights. But in the power hierarchy of Hollywood, being right didn't matter. Being compliant did. And Winger never mastered compliance. The irony? The very traits that made her difficult, honesty, refusal to compromise, an unshakable sense of self, are the ones audiences still admire today. If she'd been a man, the same headlines would have called her a visionary. Instead, Hollywood closed ranks. But Winger understood the trade. To keep her voice, she would have to risk losing the room. And when the room is built to silence you, leaving might be the only way to win. By 1995, Debra Winger had 3 Oscar nominations, a string of box office hits, and a reputation that both terrified and fascinated Hollywood. She also had a decision to make. The scripts coming her way felt like echoes, recycled characters, safe formulas, the kind of roles designed to keep her name in lights, but her mind in chains. One day, standing in an open field in Ireland beside her husband, she simply said, "I'm done." No press conference, no magazine farewell spread, just a quiet exit. She wasn't walking away in disgrace or defeat. She was walking away with her dignity intact. For the next decade, she chose smaller projects, independent films, and the occasional stage role. She chose being a mother, a wife, a person first. Hollywood assumed she'd come crawling back. She never did. Her departure baffled an industry built on addiction to attention. Why would someone at her peak choose obscurity? Winger's answer was simple. If your heart's not in it, the work doesn't deserve you. In retrospect, her exit feels prophetic. Decades before social media campaigns and public reckonings, Winger fought and often lost battles against sexism, creative control, and the machinery of celebrity. She fought them alone. Today, as younger actresses speak out about those same battles, Winger's choices read less like rebellion and more like survival. She wasn't burned out. She was burning a path for herself, away from the cameras, toward a life she could actually live. Her career didn't end because she failed. It paused because she refused to fail herself. And that, perhaps, is the rarest role any actor in Hollywood has ever played, choosing freedom over applause. Debra Winger's list of the 6 isn't about grudges, it's about truth. The truth that some collaborations bruise you, some break you, and some simply leave you unchanged. At 70, She can name names without fear because she's not looking for redemption. She already earned it by refusing to betray herself when it mattered most. In a town that rewards obedience, she chose defiance. In an industry that forgets easily, her courage is remembered. The question is no longer why Hollywood called her difficult. The question is whether we're ready to call her what she truly was: fearless.